everyone, and welcome to Real Life Talks. I'm your host, Yvonne Heath, founder of Love Your Life to Death and the I Just Showed Up movement. So I am so excited to have my friend, lovely Janet Wiszowaty with me today. Janet, hello, how are you doing today?
Great. It's kind of warm here in Edmonton, and
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I heard it's like 105 Fahrenheit in Kelowna or something. So I guess I can't complain.
Lillooet had 47 Celsius yesterday.
Yikes, that's a little too warm. That is
a little warm,
too
yeah.
warm. Yes. Well, despite the warmth, which of course we can't complain about, I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you today. And it's funny because a lot of people say, "Oh, COVID-19, I'm so tired of talking about COVID-19 and all this." And I say, you know what? We need to talk about COVID-19. We need to share our stories. Everything from disappointment to devastation, literally affecting everyone in the world in 2020 and moving forward. And Janet, I love that you took upon yourself to gather 21 people, including yourself, and write an anthology entitled The Year the World Paused, Stories of Inspiration and Transformation. First of all, kudos to you for gathering all of those people, because I imagine at times it was like herding cats trying to get everybody together and get stories. But reading the stories was truly, it really touched my heart. It was kind of life-changing, and I just felt so connected, and it was so validating of the things we were going through. So thank you so much for taking on this immense task. Tell me what motivated you or inspired you to write this, and a little of what the experience was like for you.
Well, it all started, I was working up in Whitehorse, and unlike a lot of people, I worked a lot.
Yes.
I worked a lot during that and traveled between two different places. And I woke up with morning with the title in my head, and like some inspired things, it didn't go away. And I was in a couple of programs, and I just dropped it. I says, who wants to write a story? I'm going to put a book together. And some heard it, some didn't, and some wanted to and didn't follow through. But the end result was our book.
Absolutely. And the end result, I feel, is exactly those who shared needed to share, and the world needed to hear these messages. And I mean, it's interesting because I was combing through the story saying, what can we talk about? And there's just so much richness, and the diversity of the stories and of the experiences. And what hit me the most, I think, was the incredible honesty and vulnerability of the authors. Did you think that people would be sharing so deeply and so honestly?
I was hoping that, and as you know, that I spoke individually to all the authors. I read their first drafts, some second, some third drafts, just to try and get those stories out, because that's what needed to come out. And a lot of them had never written before. Mm-hmm. So it's just the encouragement, and also having the group when people could be on them, the group calls, because those then themselves helped people create that synergy where they were in doubt, maybe somebody else, and their stories all related. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not the same, but really the energy was the same.
Well, and it's the human experience, right?
Totally.
Like it was so much about the human experience. And, you know, there's so many things. First of all, I want to, you dedicated the book to all your teachers. And I love that it went all the way back to your grade 5 teacher, Mr. Rudy Thiessen. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Mr. Rudy Thiessen. He was an inspiration.
Well, and you know what? I love that so much. And I, again, kudos to every teacher out there who is changing lives. And here's the, especially in COVID, how challenging it was for all educators, right? And to think that here you are dedicating this to a grade 5 teacher. So every teacher out there, if you don't feel like you're making an impact right now, just know that your words can have a ripple throughout someone's life, right? I think that's a really important point, don't you? I mean, you
Yeah,
have
and
no
he
idea.
failed me, actually. He failed me in reading.
Oh,
I failed
and he
reading.
still got it.
But he
That's
had the
pretty
most
impressive.
amazing stories. He
Yes.
just, I was in a 2-room school, small town,
Wow.
and he bought us boxing gloves. So if somebody had an argument, they went out the door and they had boxing gloves. He bought an organ for us. Like he just was there for us. And so
Yeah.
that made it a fun year, whether I failed reading or not.
Well, but again, that's so important. And I just felt that was important to share because sometimes we think, whatever we're doing in life, are we making a difference? And look at all these years later.
Yeah.
And then in the forward, so the lovely Kathleen Seeley wrote the forward. And I love that she said that this pause, this 2020, when it all began, caused us to rethink every aspect of our lives. And she wrote, disturbance, confusion, and a sense of chaos are no signs we are about to be destroyed. These are, in fact, the conditions that awaken us to our own possibility. That is just like, you just kind of have to sit with that, right?
Yeah.
And literally every person in this, I mean, some were tremendous challenges, excruciating pain.
Yeah.
And then they were awakened to their own possibility. And it's right. They showed us what is possible. And so there's 21 stories. Well, I mean, my story and your story included. I was very honored, by the way. Thank you for including me. And I mean, I shared my story of all the disappointment in my life, right? Disappointment as a speaker, disappointment for 16-year-old twins that we couldn't see our son out west. And no, it wasn't, we didn't experience the death of loved ones. No, financially, my husband had great job security as a paramedic. And that doesn't mean that my disappointment and our disappointment isn't valid, right? And we don't need to compare. It was disappointing, certainly. And your journey, when I was reading your chapter, thinking, so you were in the eye of the storm.
Yeah, and didn't know it.
Storm, and you didn't know it. You have to just share a little of that. I mean, you were abroad. You were on a cruise. I felt terrified when I was like, oh, I had no idea. I mean, you were in it, not knowing what you were in.
Yeah, we house sit, and we like to house sit all over the world. And we spent 3 weeks house sitting in Spain. So we got to Spain the beginning of December and went on a cruise from Barcelona, a Mediterranean cruise on June the 9th. We got back the 9th. I can't remember what the exact dates were, but yeah, about the third day in, fourth, I just wasn't feeling good and ended up in the infirmary and on oxygen and confined to my room, and just not that I even wanted to come out. But I'll tell you, my biggest disappointment in that whole thing, being sick is sick, but I missed seeing Malta. That was the one thing I wanted to see on the cruise, was to see Malta.
Right.
But yeah, you know what? And of course, I didn't know anything about the COVID until after, long story short, I ended up going up north to work, and that's when we started hearing about it.
Yes, like, oh, that's, yeah, people over here on cruise ships and being flown home. Oh, that's what happened to me. I mean, that's, that has to just be a little terrifying. I mean, I'm sure you're so grateful to be home, and yet to look back and say, wow, I was a part of that from the beginning.
And I'll tell you that the crew and the medical staff on the cruise ship were wonderful. There were 3 other people in the infirmary with the same conditions that I had. But they were excellent. I couldn't have asked for better care. The doctor arranged for my meals to come to my room. They sent a wheelchair to pick me up. He didn't want me walking. They were kudos to it. And it's not, for anybody that might be afraid of cruising, it's never going to stop me from cruising, guys. Well, I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
These guys all on the cruise are number one.
Well, that's amazing. And I'm sure like that, what a relief to feel that, right? I mean, it happened, and moving forward, we all have choices to make. And I know some people say, I'm not going on a cruise. Yeah. And yet, and everybody has a very unique journey. And so for you to have experienced that and be able to say that, good for you. Good for you. And thank goodness you weren't on one of the cruises that had to circle around for weeks. Oh my goodness.
Well, as long as they would have had books, I would have been okay.
I guess you're like, darn, I would have liked that. Well, I want to go through just a couple. I mean, I would love to go through it all. We won't have time, but some of the authors, like Holly Johnson, saying flexibility is key to survival and key to our sanity. And, that just shows like we always have a choice. We don't always have the choice we wish we had, and Dima shared that in that time her father died. And I could feel her pain. She said, "You left me drowning in my sorrow, not knowing how to swim in the deep sea." When you think of that.
And
wow.
I just want to clarify that for Dima, her father didn't pass from COVID.
No.
So,
but in that time frame,
yeah,
right?
Totally. Yes, yeah.
In that time frame. And again, you have to sit and say, for people to experience the death of a parent, even when they're an adult.
Oh,
right?
Totally.
It's devastating. It's devastating. And she just shared that vulnerability. And then for Judith Richardson Schroeder talking about her husband being diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, the cancer word in all of this. And she realized that she was choosing to ignore any signs that I was becoming exhausted or overwhelmed. Right? And how many people do that? How many people could relate to that when someone else is ill and they're just putting themselves to the side?
Yeah. And when exactly, because we're so concerned about somebody else. And she just, and I've known Judy for a while now, and it's was devastating. The year before, we'd all been on a cruise together. So, and
that's that whole life is unpredictable, prepare for anything, right? Mm-hmm. Like, again, in this, as everyone's sharing their different experience, and then like Diane Ipperseal sharing, one of the most devastating things was her sister-in-law dying. Yeah. Her sister-in-law, who she said she was like the fittest person she knew, and that kind of grief. And she said, the sudden departure, her sister-in-law's sudden departure was the final blow, because, in COVID, there was one thing after the other. And yet she could see, I am grateful to the pandemic for allowing me to finally get in touch with my grief.
Yeah, because again, her sister-in-law didn't pass of COVID either.
Right.
And
that's the thing.
We have to acknowledge that there were passings all along, not just to COVID. So people were grieving all kinds of things, grieving the loss of a job, grieving the loss of not seeing their elderly parents, or just connecting, right?
100%. And that's the whole thing. Grief shows no mercy. It arrives unannounced, uninvited. It does not care what else you are going through. So, you had like this global grief, which is the pandemic, which we don't recognize, that people are grieving.
Yeah.
And all the rest of life's grief, loss, transitions, change are continuing.
Correct.
They're still continuing. So it's like you have this, these layers of grief. And so for people to understand, if they're struggling through this, I'm actually more concerned when people say it's all fine. I mean, right? I struggled. I struggled, and people call me the grief expert. I'm not an expert. I'm just, it's like keep your friends close, your enemies closer. I want to understand it, and I'm okay with not being okay. And I struggled. And nothing can make you an expert and shield grief from your life.
No, it's a way of life. It is part of your life. There's a story I read in my workshops called The Little Soul in the Sun. And, there's no up without down. Well, there's no grief without happiness, right? You wouldn't know either one without the other.
Light, dark, sunshine, right? Like it's all part of it. And again, with everyone sharing their vulnerable, true selves, it was just, I felt it so connected. And you also had, it wasn't all females, male Andy Atwood. Again, I wanted to hug him when I was reading, and he said, no home, no job, a teenager in school, and then he had to move. And he actually wrote, I've grown accustomed to being kicked in the backside by life. And I just talk about, I want to say, first of all, I'm hugging you for feeling that and sharing that vulnerability, especially as a man who, I'm very tough. I don't need to show my emotion. And good for you. And wow, those words hurt your heart.
Yeah, I was very grateful when Andy agreed to be part of the book. And the other two men as well.
Yes.
Kelly's story is really, really different and very special and needs to be heard. And Mark's too. We tend to know as women, other women going through it,
yes,
but it's not as readily known as the men that are going through it.
Absolutely. So 100%. And Mark shared how his, he had a certain journey he had all planned out, and it totally went over here. I do want to go back to Andy for 1 second, and because it made me feel better, because what he said made my heart ache. And then he shared, for me, 2020 was about slowing down and breaking out of my own mental prison. The one I had built walls around myself to be able to survive. My own mental prison. So he took his responsibility for his own life and said, okay, let's kick him in the backside. I'm going to take responsibility and do something about it. And I just think that's extraordinary to share. And yes, Kelly's journey as well, certainly share a little of Kelly's journey, which I know was also a challenging journey.
Totally. Kelly had, I met Kelly several years ago, and he was in transition from female to male. And so the big thing about 2020 was a major surgery that he chose to continue with. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't an easy thing. He grieved that.
Absolutely. There is grief in that.
Yeah. When you're removing a part of your body that has, and I think he said, 43 years? I can't remember the number, how old he was. But, we grieve. Grief isn't about death. Grief is about everything and disappointment and all kinds of things in our life. But there was so much joy in our connecting to and sharing these stories, because he told me because he was one of the ones that I was after, and I'd say, this isn't your story. This isn't your story. And he said to me, he says, this is my therapy.
I love that so much. And you know what? I'm glad you said that, because when I was writing my book and in all the stories I've shared, it is in in sharing our stories that we heal ourselves and each other. And people realize they are not alone in what they are going through. And Kelly's story of making this decision and having this surgery, and then delays.
Yes.
Because of COVID, delays after making these transformational decisions and transitioning and continuing on, and then to be delayed, I can't imagine. But I love this, that Kelly wrote, I knew there was a reward at the end of the process. I would be able to look in the mirror and physically see the real me and finally love me.
Yeah.
Doesn't that just get you in the feels? right? To when you think of, and I think it's important for people to read these words to know that, imagine looking in the mirror. I mean, we all say, oh, I have gray hair, wrinkles, and that's just
Yeah.
vanity. I'm sorry. I'm embracing the wrinkles and the gray and everything. When you actually look in the mirror and you don't feel like that is who you truly are, right? So to wish this for someone and to know that they are, you know, sharing this. And I am so delighted that Kelly was able to, you know, have his surgery and move forward. Another story, and again, they all hit me, but Veronica Ramos Clark, this incredible human, had one of the most challenging to say the very least, upbringings, childhood, my goodness. And then, I mean, went through like low self-esteem, agoraphobia, abuse, like so many horrific things. And then chose, my life's mission was to help people recover from depression, low self-esteem, anxiety, PTSD, addiction, domestic violence, and other issues like agoraphobia and stress management. To take your hard life experience and to create something positive from it. I believe that is the greatest gift you can give yourself and the world, because it either is just your hard story and you can stay stuck in it, or it's your hard story and you create something amazing from it. And that's what she chooses every day.
And even her challenge on getting certified in another area to help more of her clients, what she had to go through to even do that during COVID, to have to travel to a totally different area just to work on that. That is dedication and passion. And she's
like an Energizer bunny.
Yeah, she is. She is. She's a beautiful person.
Keeping on. And it was extraordinary. And, you know, I'm going through my notes and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to miss stuff. One of the other things, two things that hadn't occurred to me that some of the authors wrote, and you're going to have to get the book to get this, who it is, but you'll know. Two things. One, someone shared about how their very good friend's personality completely changed in COVID. Share a little about that, Janet, because you know what, that hadn't occurred to me.
Well, do you know what it is? It's still happening, right? And it's really sad that, and I know the person you're talking about, and she said this person had really changed her life, got her thinking of the path that she's
positively
on. And again, the grief of having lost that part of her friend who had changed so much, and was it comes down to news and what the propaganda, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. But that's happened. That's separated families. That's separated friendships. It's so terrible what this has done. And I don't talk just about the COVID, but all the politics around it and all the questioning around it and that. And I really wanted the positive, and it hadn't even gotten to where it is now when we were working on the book.
Well, and again, that's the elephant in the room, right? It's already hard enough. And then it's caused so much division.
Yeah.
Right. And you have your conspiracy theorists and you have people over here and how sad. And I feel like this book is helping us to find a way through it all, find a way through the mud, because it shines a light on the different experiences. And then there was one more story that, again, I hadn't really thought, like a mom who was a traveler and she did business all over and she was this wonderful, her profession. I mean, she was a mom and her professional life, and that completely was halted, and she became a full-time mom. I will tell you right now, I will say it, being a full-time mom, I mean, my career was often your break from parenting, totally. Right? And I thought, wow. So it just shone the light on so many different experiences. And So just, we could talk about this all day, but tell me how the book has changed you or your perspective, and what you're going to share the book with the world, obviously.
Yeah, you know what? It brought wonderful people, new friendships and that. And to say this really is an international book. We have Catherine from Ghana and West Africa. We've got Dima from Switzerland. We've got Shannon, Mariette, and Andy from the UK. And then the rest of us from the United States and Canada. And I always mention Alaska separately because Alaska really is an entity on itself.
Like its own little area, yes.
And Betty was a breath of fresh air. Her story, I loved her story. And like you, having gone through it, my husband and I chose to take this project on, and we've read those stories over and over again as they grew. And Judy was great. Carnelian Moon had put it together, but it really does. It makes me want to share more and more, because these people are changing other people's lives.
Absolutely.
I know that Diane had mentioned to me her brother read it and cried and was grateful she had written it.
Well, and that's the thing. Everyone will be able to relate to a story, and I will encourage everyone. I know at the time we're recording this, the ebook is the hard copy or the paperback is coming. The Year the World Paused, Stories of Inspiration and Transformation. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
I got that right? Yeah. And so I feel like, again, as people say, oh, I'm tired of talking about COVID. It's like, yes, and educate yourself, because, here again, the elephant in the room, we're not just going to get the memo that, oh, COVID is over, and then we're on the other side and we're all fine and dandy. I believe that we have to continue to educate ourselves and connect. And these stories are a good way of connecting, because what we need to do now is to avoid what I call PTSD, post-pandemic stress disorder, because there will be a ripple, right? And the more we connect with stories, the more we are validated with how we feel, the better off we will be moving forward and helping our younger generations move forward by empowering ourselves, by validating our experience.
And this book is not just for this past year. Our lives pause all the time. I was in a serious car accident. My year paused for a year as I healed. So these are just stories to get you thinking and to realize they're from 21 walks of life. None of us experienced it the same way. And so if nothing else, I want this book to be shared and to show you what is possible.
And that's what it does. That is what it does, Janet. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for gathering these authors. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. We'll have the website there. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
So thanks for joining us, everyone. Real Life Talks is about learning how to just show up for ourselves and just show up for each other and sharing incredible stories. So my call to action, as always, if you want to be empowered and resilient, plan your life, plan your death, and then just love your life to death. And always bring your own tambourine to the party. Bye for now.
Thank you.